Skushin Rabot, Nimot Tovot. Welcome back, everyone, in the new year. Extra special credit for the early start and the fact that it's Taanit. We're rocking and rolling in Zechut land. Okay, let's get ready to rumble. We are on Daf Chaf Gimel Amud Aleph. If you're following the art scroll, it's 23A1. Okay? I would say, let's see exactly here, Ma'aseh, about 10 lines down from the top. Ma'aseh sheshalchu lechoni ha'ma'agal. Tan Rabbanan, our rabbis taught, Pa'am echad yatsa, Rov Adar, most of Adar had passed, okay, just so we have an understanding what that means. That's the month before Pesach. So they got already up to almost halfway through the month of Adar, which is right before the month of Pesach begins, the month of Nisan. The month away from Nisan itself, from Pesach itself, and the rain did not fall. They sent to Choni HaMa'agal, Choni the circle maker. Hitpalel, pray, v'yerdu gshamim, and the rains will fall. Hitpalel, he prayed, v'lo yerdu gshamim, and the rains did not fall. Ag uga, he made a circle, ve'amad betocha, and he stood in the circle, kiderech she'asa Chavakuk HaNavi, just as Chavakuk HaNavi had also done. Most people are aware that Choni HaMa'agal made circles, but they're not aware that Choni HaMa'agal learned the art of circle making on a breakneck class from Chavakuk HaNavi. Okay? Shnei Amar, as the pasuk says in Havakuk, Al Mishmarti E'emda ve'et yatzva al matzor, I stood on my guard post, right? And I stood up al matzor against the difficult time. And if you look number bet over there, you'll see on the side. And I would wait to see what was said to me and what I'll be able to respond al tochachti on my rebuke. Chavakuk at the time lived in a period where people were bothered by the question of tzaddik v'ra'alo, rasha v'tovlo, when a tzaddik has bad things happen to him, and a Rasha has good things happen to him, and they're wondering what's going on. Let din v'let dayan. There's no judgment, there's no judge, and there's no justice. So Havakuk, he literally made a circle around himself, and he says, I'm not leaving, I'm in this pit that I'm designated for myself. I put myself in matzor, in captivity, until I get an answer for this question. Now, this to me is astonishing, number one. Number one, why? Because who else asked this question? Tzaddik v'ra'alo, Rasha v'tovlo, I want to understand. Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't make deals with God. Answer me or I'm not leaving. You know? I'm in the heavens, I'm not going anywhere until you answer my question. Chavakuk is making deals. Chavakuk is, what's going on? Not only that, the Gemara tells us in another place that there was a tendency that some of the Chachamim had to try and unify, to come up with, in physics, there's something called grand unifying theory, where we take all the various ideas in the universe and we try and whittle them down so that they aren't many different disparate laws and rules, but actually they are grand unifying principles. And they managed to go from hundreds and they got it down to 4, and they thought they even got it down to 3. Okay? Ultimately, they believe that there's going to be one rule that sits at the core of all of the laws of nature. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. We already have the answer. We're waiting patiently for them to catch up, okay? But this idea was expressed by the rabbis. What is the grand unifying principle of the Torah? We are aware, most famous, of one example of a rabbi that tried to whittle it down to 1.
Oh, when he stood on one leg?
Stands on one leg. He says to him, he says, "V'after kamocha." Okay, love your neighbor love your friend as you love yourself. Everything else is pirusha zil gemor. Actually, most people get that Gemara wrong. Hillel told him, "Mad desani lach lechavrecha l'taaseh." What you hate done to you, don't do to others. Rabbi Akiva is the one that actually then later on says, "V'after kamocha," which we then say is what Hillel also meant. Okay, but in either scenario, those two, the Kaneh Echad chose that mitzvah. The Gemara tells us, B'chavakuk v'he'emidan alachat. There was a rabbi who said that there's 3 principles. Then there was another rabbi, comes Chavakuk, and he says, Ba Chavakuk vehemidan al echad. Chavakuk came and stood up all the Torah on one law. What's Chavakuk's law? What's his one unifying principle of all of the Torah and Judaism? Tzaddik be'emunato yechyeh. A tzaddik be'emunato, with his faith, yechyeh, that's how he lives. And I always thought it's so interesting that it's the same Chavakuk that demands to know what's going on with the tzaddik v'ra'alo, rasha v'tovlo. He's the one that perhaps this is the response that a tzaddik doesn't get that answer.
Question, even Moshe didn't get the answer.
Exactly. That tzaddik, he doesn't have this. He doesn't have the answer to this. What does he have? What does he live with? Be'emunato yecheh. He has to live with his faith without the answer. So either way, but Chavakuk is the one that makes this circle. Choni HaMa'agal learns and does the same thing. Ag uga ve'amad betocha. He drew a circle and he stood inside of it. Amar lefanav, and he said in front of God, Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, Banecha samu fenehem elai. Your children, came to me. They put their faces to me. Shani ki ben bayit lefanecha. I am like a house member in your home. This line, Samu fenehem elai, should be very familiar. We only said it yesterday. It's the tefillah that the Baal Tokea, that the one who's going to blow the shofar, says to God, your children placed their faces towards me, and they came to me to ask me to act on their behalf, to blow the shofar on their behalf. So just as in that tefillah, the Chazan or the Baal Tokea says, and just if I'm not worthy, don't take it out on them, they made me a shaliach to come to you. Choni HaMa'agal says the same thing. Not that I'm worthwhile, not that I'm the biggest tzaddik, but I am ben bayit. I'm like one of the house servants. So I'm always in, I'm always out. I could come in and leave whenever I want. So they came to me to ask me to come to you to pray for them for rain. Nishba ani b'shimcha hagadol. I swear by your great and holy name, she'en yizaz mikan, that I will not leave this place until you forgive your children. Now, this dichotomy should not be overlooked. Because on the one hand, he's saying, I'm not worthy of making requests. Why'd they come to me? Because I'm like the house servant. I'm always in and out of the royal throne room. So I have access to the king. But that guy who has access doesn't then make demands of the king. I'm not leaving here until, that's very much not a house servant. That's the king's perhaps best friend, the king's most treasured son or wife, right? So you see there's a little bit of a dichotomic relationship between how he's speaking, leading one to understand that Choni understood how close he was with God, but always presented it as if he was a nobody and they only came to him because he had access. But meanwhile, we see from the way he speaks that that's not the case. This is wild. Immediately, it starts raining. Like, soft rain. Amrulo Talmidav, the students say, Rebbe, our rabbi, Re'inucha velo namut. We get to see you, we see you now, but velo namut, we don't want to die. This rain is not going to solve the fact that we're all going to starve to death. We don't have food. Okay? Kimdumin anu, it seems to us, said the students, she'en geshamim yordim, the rain is not coming down, ela latir shvuatcha, only to undo your shevuah. Now I love this Gemara, because are they wrong? No, they're right. This is not the rain that we need. The rain is only coming down latir shvuatcha. Okay, let's review. What did Choni HaMa'agal do? He prayed, and what did God say? Okay. No. Amad v'hitpalel ve'lo yadu gshamim. He makes a circle, swears he's not going to leave the circle unless God answers his prayer. What does God do? He answers his prayer. He held God captive. Okay, so he answers the prayer. He answers the shivua. Now it starts raining a little because God fulfilled the shivua and he could leave the circle. Come to the students and say, it seems like he's only doing it in order to fulfill the shivua. Yes, have you been following the story? Right? But I think what the students are saying is, Rebbe, when you asked God, what did you say? I'm not going to leave the circle ad shetirachem al banecha, until you have mercy on your children. He didn't say I'm not leaving the circle until it rains. He said I'm not leaving the circle until you have mercy on your children. Say the students, he didn't do what you said he was going to do. So you can't leave yet. They kept the pressure, so to speak, on the neck. The students. Yeah, because they're saying you can't leave. It's not he only fulfilled your shivua, but he didn't actually listen to what you said, because this is not the geshem of rahamim that you asked for. Amar, Choni says to God, wild, what's going on here? Lo kach sha'alti. This is not what I asked for. Like God's a waiter. I didn't order this, Mechila. This is not what I ordered. I ordered the one with the chicken, and this is the one with the beef.
Yeah, there's no mechila in there. Even on top of it.
Not even, lo kach sha'alti. Not what I asked for. Ela gishme borot sichin me'arot. I asked for a rain of borot sichin me'arot that fills up all of the receptacles, all of the pits, all of the, what's it called? The wells of the people. Yardu bizaf. Immediately, the rain started pouring with a vengeance, with a almost like with an anger. Until every drop, kimelofi chavit, was the size of the opening of a chavit. The drops were incredibly large of pieces of water, or kamiyot. V'shiaru chachamim. The chachamim at the time estimated melug. There wasn't a drop that was less than the size of a lug, which is a tremendous amount of water. Amrulo talmidav. The student said to him, Rebbe, Ri'inucha, now we see you, velo namut, but we're scared of dying. Okay? Right, we're scared of dying the other way. Kim duminanu, she'en gishamim yordin, ela le'abed ha'olam. These rains are only coming to destroy the world. Again, what they're pointing out to him is, you said you're not going to leave unless ad sheterachem al banecha. This is not what rachamim al banecha looks like. Okay? Amar lefanav. Choni HaMa'agal turns to God again. Lo kach sha'alti. Not what I asked for again. Ela gishmei ratzon beracha undava. I asked for rains of ratzon, of where God wants us, a relationship with us. Beracha is blessing us. Unidava, of generosity. Interesting that both times he doesn't say more or less. He doesn't say a lot or a little. What does he say? Borot sichinu me'arot. Each time, notice, there's three things that he uses to describe the rain that he's asking for. I asked for borot sichinu me'arot. Second time, I asked for ratzon bracha undava. Interesting. Maybe we'll come back and visit that if we have time. Yardu kitiknan. The rain comes down according to the way it was needed, the way it was necessary. Ad she'alu kol ha'am lahar habayit. But remember, it had already rained. Forget Ian. It rained like a monsoon. Until now, the rain it was adjusted in terms of its amount, in terms of quantity, but it was already raining on top of this deluge that had come from before. Ad she'alu kol ha'am lahar habayit, until all the people were forced to go to Har HaBayit, which was uphill, if you will, from the amount of rain that was there. Two opinions. If they went to Har HaBayit because it was higher or because they needed to pray, they were afraid. Amru lo, they said to him, Rebbe, kishem shitpalalta sheyirdu, same way you prayed they should come down, kach itpalel v'yelchu lahem, pray and to have the rain subside, let them go away. Amar lehem, he said to them, kach mekublani, so is what I received as a misorah. She'en mitpalelin al rov hatova, you don't pray for an excess of good that it should be taken away. Afal piken, even though I say that, haviu li par hoda'ah, bring me a par hoda'ah. What's a par hoda'ah? It's a shilamim. Again, machloket exactly why he was asking for a par shilamim. Was it because so he could ask for forgiveness for what he was about to do? Or was it because he was saying thank you to Hashem and the thank you itself would solve the problem? But either way, he put his two hands on the par, he leaned on it, he said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the world, your Jewish nation took out of Egypt. They can't deal with too much good and they can't deal with too much suffering. If you're angry at them, they can't survive. You give them too much, they can't survive. Why does he say this? Why does he say they're like the people that left Egypt? What's the reference to the people that left Egypt over here? So effectively what he's communicating is that we've already seen that this is part of the way the Jewish people react. Why? When the Jewish people got too much gold, what happened with the gold? Egel HaZahav. Where do we know that from? Because Moshe Rabbeinu calls the place of the Egel, what does he call it? Di Zahav. because of dai zahav, because they had too much gold, that's why they made the egel hazav. So you see, God, when you give them too much, what do? It doesn't work out for them. Also, when they don't have enough, when they didn't have the bread, they didn't have the water, they're complaining. They didn't have enough. So they can't handle too little or too much. We're like a Goldilocks nation. It needs to be exactly the right temperature. It needs to be exactly. So Borei Olam, if you know that that's who we are, how are you giving us something that we can't handle? That's the depth of his prayer. If Am Yisrael's nature had not already been revealed, then how can Chonia Ma'agal go to God and say, not like this, not like this? But if I asked you, Terachem al Banecha, and it has previously been established that the people can't handle too much and they can't handle too little, then it should have come down Kitiknan from beforehand. In which case, the excess over here is not defined as Rov Beracha. You got that? That's the Chokhmah here. That was what Choni HaMa'agal was gaining with this comparison to Mitzrayim. Okay, so the Gemara says, fascinating what happens after that. Okay? It should be your will. It should stop raining. And there should be comfort and salvation in the world. Immediately the wind starts to blow. And the clouds get dispersed. And the sun starts to shine. By the way, the best Choni HaMa'agal would have killed it as meteorologist. Choni HaMa'agal. Could you imagine? Even if he's wrong, he's not wrong. He's like, we need the sun. The sun comes out. And the people were able to go out to the fields. They were able to bring mushrooms and truffle mushrooms, wild. Now you think about that for 1 second. Why is this a relevant point in the Gemara? How do mushrooms grow?
Through rain.
Mushrooms grow on moisture, right? That's how a mushroom grows. It's a fungus that grows on moisture.
There wasn't a lot of rain.
And there hadn't been a lot of rain. So why is the Gemara telling us at the end of this story that they went out and they got mushrooms? That's how they seasoned. They grated truffle on the par.
That was enough.
Oh, the end of the Nekuda is that this is God's, so to speak, icy. This is being Hakadosh Baruch Hu's almost indignant response. Like, you're not allowed to pray for a reversal beracha. You pulled this shtick on me where you brought a hoda'ah, and you did this thing and you said, I'm going to listen to you, Choni HaMa'agal. But just so we're clear, nothing I send is not beracha. Look at the aftermath of the excess water was now absorbed and created this whole new ecosystem of mushrooms and truffles that were not there before. Shalach lo Shimon ben Shetach. We were introduced to Shimon ben Shetach last week and remarkable backstory of his relatives, his sister, his royal sister, his megalomaniac, brother-in-law. So Shalach lo Shimon ben Shetach. Shimon ben Shetach sends him a message. Ilmale choni, if not for the fact that you were choni ata, gozrani alecha nidui, I would put you in cherem. Who do you put in cherem, by the way? You put in cherem the worst of the worst. That's a guy goes to Beit Din, asks denies the get, the Beit Din puts him in cherem. Then we put him in cherem. Someone who does the worst things, you put the guy in cherem.
Is that where the word haram comes from?
Similar. Cherem means something which is set aside. So haram is inappropriate. You're not allowed to do it. It's something which should be set aside from the way a person, right? The pasuk says that you should not send your hand b'kol hacherem. When they gathered booty from the cities of Eretz Yisrael that they were supposed to burn after they captured them, so you had Achan, he sent his hand and he took from the cherem, right? We find also cherem yelachem. It should be cherem for you. Cherem means something which is set aside from you. It's not to be touched. It's not to be used. It's not to be done. Okay. So in this scenario, he says, "I would have put you in cherem. I would have put you in nidui. She'ilu shanim. If you would have lived, if these years were the years of Kishne Eliyahu in the time of Eliyahu Hanavi, shemaftechot geshamim biyado shel Eliyahu, that at that time Eliyahu Hanavi came to God and he's like, could you give me one of the keys? I need one of the keys. At the time there was a wicked king called Achav, married to a terrible woman called Izebel, and at that time They were killing all the Chachamim. They were bringing Avodah Zarah. Eliyahu Hanavi comes to Achav and he says, with the people following in your ways to worship Avodah Zarah, until we solve this issue, there's not going to be rain. Then he turns to God and he says, God, I swore that there's not going to be rain. Give me the keys. We started Masechet Taanit, if you remember, that there are keys that God has, and one of those keys one of the keys is for rain. Eliyahu Hanavi took the key. Lo nimtza Hashem shamayim mitchalel. If you would have lived in the time of Eliyahu, where the key was in Eliyahu's hands, Lo nimtza Hashem shamayim mitchalel al yadecha. Wouldn't the name of heaven be desecrated by your hand? What does he mean? The same way at the time Eliyahu Hanavi said, I don't want there to be rain, because the people need to be punished. Imagine you lived in that time, and then you came and drew a circle around yourself and said, unless you make it rain, I'm not leaving. There would have been chilul Shem Shamayim either way. Either to Eliyahu, because he said, I swear it's not going to happen, or to you, but either or to God. But this would not have worked out well. So how do you know that you now did this, that there isn't already such a neshibuah elsewhere? Not necessarily from Eliyahu. It might have been that God had decided to punish the Jews and to not have rain so that they would do teshuvah. Now you're coming, drawing this circle, you're forcing God's hand. Shem Shamayim could have been mitchalel yadecha. Aval ma e'eselach. How could I do that to you? I can't do anything to you. She'ata mitchatel lifnei hamakom. You sin, you do the wrong thing in front of God. Ve'oseh lecha retzoncha, and he still does whatever you ask of him. Keben shemitchateh al aviv, like a son who doesn't listen necessarily to his father. Ve'oseh lo retzonon, still his father does for him exactly as he asks. Ve'omer lo, he says to him, Abba, holichen li rachtzeni, take me to the bathhouse. Wash me off, bechamin, in warm water. Then after you finish washing me in warm water, shotfeni v'tzonan, rinse me off. Give me that last, the splash of cold water, like when you get out of the sauna, right? What's the comparison here? The same way Choni asked for something, and then asked for something else. So it's like a spoiled son says, take me to the warm bathhouse. Now we're in the warm bathhouse. Now go get me cold water to wash me off when I get out of the warm bathhouse. Ten li egozim, shkedim, efarsekim, rimonim. Give me almonds, and give me nuts, and give me peaches, and give me rimonim, pomegranates. And the father gives him. And on you the pasuk says, your father and your mother will rejoice in you. And the one that gave birth to you will be filled with joy. Now we'll continue later on with the Gemara continues on this line of reasoning what happens with someone who is of that level of Choni HaMa'agal. Baruch Adonai Le'olam.